coincidence to me. There's just no coincidence in that. So no, I always will be healing, but I said that I was self-aware for a reason. When you're aware of an issue that you have and the things that you're dealing with, it's a lot different than not knowing. It's like somebody cheating on you that you dated and you don't know who it was. It's everybody. But once you know, and it don't make it better, but it does, because if you find out, oh, it was her again. Now I know exactly who it was. I got a focus point. It's not, well, maybe it's her. Or maybe I'm this crazy. Or maybe this is going on. Or maybe this is going to hit me. Or maybe I should talk about, no. It's like, this is what happened in my family. It affected me. It affects my relationships and friendships. It affects how I view people. Now I can deal with it. So I've always had that. You know, I don't just cut people off no more. Like let me tell you something. I had my grandmother told me one time, she says, I've never seen somebody that if they don't cross the T in Terrell right, you never speak to them again. I ain't never seen somebody you can just be like, how do you do that? I was like, because I had to do it for the people that I didn't choose. I had to cut these people off to survive in the world. I couldn't leave Buffalo loving these people who abused and hurt me and did all these things, trying to figure out how to keep these relationships and contacts with these, and then go out into the world. But it destroyed that it warped the way that I loved people. It warped my expectations, what I could give and what I was expecting. That's where the lines were, because I never had true boundaries, and no one, truly telling me that's wrong. You don't do that, or you love that person, even though, or you forgive them, because that's just not that bad, Terrell. You don't, and that's where I was. So I'll always be healing.
That's good.
What?
Yeah. So you ever watched your father molest your mom?
No, because after I was born, I was still too young for that. My grandfather is who had us under the umbrella, but I don't want to give away who my father was in the book so they can find out. You read it, right? You read it. However, once my grandfather did, the reason they didn't even say nothing is because of who my father was and because we were basically under this big umbrella of my grandfather who supported everybody. He wasn't wealthy, but he was more of a rich guy who was like a big supervisor at Bethlehem Steel back when they used to have, the steel, Buffalo was booming at a certain time, like in the 60s, 70s, because they had the Bethlehem Steel plants. But when that went down, it ruined the city. But anyway, he was a huge supervisor there, and he had like a lot of money for African American people at that time. So when he died, that's when everything really fell apart, and people just started saying how they really felt. Well, then my family was split up. I went with my mom and my grandmother, and my father. They did everything else. So him molesting her, and I believe, I really don't know that part, but I believe once the pregnancy and stuff started, the molestation stopped. The cat was kind of out of the bag. The last thing he was going to do was sneak back over. So, yeah. Yes, Regina.
Okay, what made you decide to, that's it.
No, ain't nothing inappropriate. I wrote a book about it.
What made you decide when Red came and got you? What made you decide to just take that leap and go?
Well, the way that I got to Detroit, so everybody, I sang with Fred Hammond. Anybody know Fred Hammond in here for commission and everything? So that's what me and Regina used to sing with Fred Hammond together. But the way that I left Buffalo is I looked on the back of it, a Winans album, and saw a phone number for their manager. And I called this man on the phone and was like, look, I want to sing. What do I need to do? And he was like, oh, well, I'm at this Winans, but I'm trying to get new artists. And I just sang to this guy on the phone. And he says, well, if you can get to Detroit, I'm now working with a new little producer who was Jay Moss at the time. I didn't know that. And he was like, can you come? And he says, he's Jay Moss, and can you come down and he'll produce a song on you? And I drove a car down there. I went and bought a car with no job. Bought a car, had a car note, and just drove the car down there because I didn't have another way. I didn't know nothing about nothing else. I was at the time 16. And so I was like, okay, drove a car down there. I don't know how they gave me this car with no job, but they did. Hence, that's how the credits started getting messed up in the beginning. So I drove this car down there, and this guy was like, you can stay, you can live down here, whatever, but you're just a phenomenal singer. And I met Jay Moss, and I was like, wait a minute. You the cousin of the Clark sisters? Oh, I'm really staying, right? So this guy, he produced a song on me, and at that time he went to Marvin Winans' church. And so he went there that night, him and his wife, I was in their basement. He says, we're gonna go to church if you wanna come with us. I was like, well, I mean, the Winans? You know, I was a kid these were people that I adored as singers. Went to Marvin Winans church with him to hear this lady. It was, I think, Jackie McCullough. Somebody was preaching, but I didn't even care because all I saw was Marvin Winans. But I turned around and Fred Hammond was standing in the back. He was dressed down, so he didn't want to come in, but he was with Noel.
Right.
Noel Hall was a keyboard player, but he was from Buffalo. And if you read the book, I used to sing in this choir called Lighthouse Choir. He played for Lighthouse. Well, he got his first big gig to leave Buffalo was Fred Hammond. I turned around and I saw him, and I was like, oh, I want to meet Fred. When I saw Noel was like, oh my God, Terrell, I never even thought of you. Fred is starting a new group, Radical for Christ. You should do it. And I was like, I mean, I got this guy who wants me to be a part. So I went to the rehearsals without the guy knowing. And Fred was like, oh, can you sing something? When I tell you, I never sang a song like that. Like, it was like, I knew this
like that day.
was the last chance in my life.
Jesus was coming.
I was like, this is it. And that's honestly where it started.
What song is that? What
Yeah.
song?
It was Fred Hammond's song, Heal the Land. It was Lift My People. I don't even remember. But I remember this. The choir was singing and he was singing. Like, and I'm watching this man that I thought, for years, this is like a star. And can sing like I like. And I'm like, God, it's Fred Hammond. And he's like, just gives me the mic. And then I sang this song and he just walked out the room. And I didn't even think whether I did good or not. I knew I did.
We always knew
Because in my mind I was thinking, you either do this or you going back to that with the car that you just stole.
You do it.
And he came back in and was like, man, I really would love for you to be a part of this new group that I just built. And I was like, okay. I went right over to the guy's house at the wine and stuff, packed my bags and told him, man, I appreciate you, but I knew that this was right. I just always followed what felt right. Even when it turned out to be sometimes not, it always turned out to be right later on for me. And that's how I started. That was it.
Oh my goodness.
Anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
So how did you get started with your Tyler Perry plays?
Oh.
I know the class reunion was your first play.
Yes.
How did you get started?
Speaking of that, so there's a girl named Pam Taylor who played my wife in Pam Taylor played my wife in Medea's Class Reunion. And that was it, yeah. Medea's Class Reunion. Well, she used to sing background for none other than the Clark sisters, because she has the range and all of that. So she was from Detroit. And so when I moved there, remember I told you Jay Moss produced me. He's the first cousin of the Clark sisters. And so he was doing a Family and Friends album. He had did a song on her, and the girl sounds so much like Karen Clark to me. And I was like, that was like one of my favorite singers. The favorite singer. And I was like, God, I want to meet this girl who sings like this. And I met her in Detroit, as I was singing with Fred, but then she left, and so she goes and she starts doing these Tyler Perry plays. So I get this call. Now, but to go back a little, Fred Hammond used to did a tour called the Tour of Life with Fred Hammond, Yolanda Adams, and Kirk Franklin. At the time, Terrell and David Mann was still on the tour they were still singing with Kirk Franklin. So before there was ever a Tyler Perry or anything, we were all together as, Tam and David was singing with Kirk, I was singing with Fred. We were all on tour together for like 2.5 years, and then that's when I left. So Pam got the job as the wife in Medea's Class Reunion, and she calls me and says, Terrell, they really need this guy, but they need a guy that has a certain look and that can sing. I said, well, you talking to the right person. I can do all of that, right? She said, Terrell, I know you can do this. I said, okay, but what is this? She says, it's a Medea play, a Tyler Perry play. I had no idea who this was. And this was when, now remember, at Medea's Class Reunion, he was already still huge. I had never seen this before. So I said, okay, I'll do it. Well, I get a call from the promoter, and the promoter was like, Terrell Carter? I said, yeah. And so he says, yeah, we try to get you, come out here. This is Arthur. And I was like, okay. He was the promoter for the same tour from Yolanda Adams, Fred Hammond, and Kirk Franklin. So it's the way it all, and my life has always been that. Just, a connection of good and bad, but I was connected to all of them. So they called, and then I became, I came out, met all of them. It's funny, I drove up to this place, this huge school in Atlanta, here, and I was like, oh my God, this thing is just so amazing, which I found out later on was Tyler's house. I had never seen nothing that big, but I thought it was his school. It's the house in Diary of a Mad Black Woman. But to drive up to it, it's set up so big, and I'm like, okay, so we're here at this thing. And I remember going in there and I sang for him, and then the next day we had auditions, and then Tam and David came. And I was like, David and Tam, like, y'all here? She was like, oh yeah, Terrell. Y'all know Tam, yeah. Tam, yeah, we all country. I love them. Love them.
Yes.
So she was like, oh, Tyler, he good. You know, you gotta have him sing. So I sang a little bit or whatever, and there was like guys and stuff sitting outside the room. And he called me, and I came out, and he brings me, Tyler Perry brings me out to where everybody else is sitting. He says, I just want to introduce you guys to Terrell Carter. He's the one who just took y'all jobs.
Dang.
That was the first time, and I'm looking at this one.
Yeah.
And I just turned around, and then he closes the door. So imagine this door closed with me standing in front of it with these people that I didn't even know that they was waiting on this. I thought I was coming and I had it already. But I did. And so that was it. And then they started from there doing Medea's class reunion. Is that it? Anybody got any other questions about the book or anything?
I think Melissa got her.
It's hot in here. It's hot. Ain't y'all hot?
Yes.
Okay, we're wrapping it up for everybody. Thank you so much. What you said. Go ahead, Regina.
What made you leave Detroit to go to LA?
Okay, so I left Detroit. Were you around during that time? Okay, I left Detroit.
Like-
Just like, you know, my thing is this. I've had, because of the way I was born and raised, I mean, Latricia know this, I mean, dealing with business stuff, I just, at the time, it is since changed, but at the time, I didn't know how. Even with you, you know, even things that we were doing together, you didn't know how, and I would mix, as an artist, your emotional side with your business side. And when I think that people ain't treat me right, instead of business-wise trying to establish a relationship and realize it might not be that, you're just like, oh, I forget this, I'm sorry. You know, it's not it. And I was like, with the whole thing with Fred Hammond, it was the same thing. I felt I wasn't getting enough, you know, people wouldn't let me sing enough. And I was like, I didn't come out here to be somebody's background singer. And I actually, yes, you did, Terrell. You did, you know, and I needed to be that. I needed to learn how to do that. I needed to watch that man do what he did on stage so I could get schooled by him, you know, but I thought in my mind, you know, I ain't doing this. And I grew up with Stevie J. Stevie J, everybody knows, of course. He was from Buffalo as well, Rochester and Buffalo, and he was with P. Diddy. So the tour of life with Fred Hammond, Yolanda Adams, and Kirk Franklin ended in New York. Who came to the show? P. Diddy and Stevie J. And Kirk Franklin actually brought me out to sing in front of like the crowd in New York, and I came out and I'm like singing and stuff. At the end of the show, P. Diddy come back, and you know, of course, everybody was excited, and Stevie was with him, and that was the time when he was at his beginning and at his height of producing. He was like, Terrell, you gotta work with me. Like, what you doing? Like, this is great. Come on here, make more money, blah, blah, blah. And of course, I'm not thinking, you know, let me figure out how to make this the right, so, you know, which is
Transition.
I'm thinking, can somebody pack my stuff in Detroit and ship it to me? Because
Right,
I knew
I'm
this
gone.
is right. I just was like, I should be with these people. Now, I still look back and I'm glad I made the decisions. I just feel like they could have been done better. They definitely could have been done better. And that's a lot about what I'm writing in the book. And the second book that I'm writing. Now, this one ends where I left home, where I leave home. The second one is when I work with all of these people, and don't worry, y'all ain't gonna sue me because all I talked about was how great y'all were, but how the things that I did should have been done better. The things that, you know, and it all is based on these people and what happened here. Everything that I was dealing with. Anyway, we're wrapping it up for those who have to go. Anyway, so with P. Diddy, I just started working with Stevie J. I left, started working with Stevie J and P. Diddy. Stevie J was writing for Quincy Jones at the time. And you know, I was like this young buck who was just a church boy who was so different than that. I was never street. I'm still not that. You know, and I'm glad I'm not. I'm glad I wasn't. However, at the time, I really wanted to be. You know, and I really wanted to be. I didn't even know. I'm like, where do I go to learn how to be street? That in itself.
He always tried.
You know what I'm saying? He tried. Right. I'm like, no. But however, we started working under Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones, and they went back to New York. He brought me to LA, and I was writing for him, for Tamia, Tevin Campbell, all of these artists. And they were going back to New York. And Quincy Jones said to me, he was like, you're a young cat that's doing what you're doing. I'll give you a publishing deal with no release commitment, which is unheard of at the time. Where I just write songs, and they just give me, I think at the time I said, it was like $5 grand a month to just write songs. But for his artists, vocal produce them though. And he was just like, everybody that I want you to do, I want you to make them kind of sing and do all of this stuff that everybody used to tell me I couldn't do well, that. And he was like, just do that. And it was funny because I never really saw him much, but I realized that was God having his hand on me, just giving me another end, just unheard of. And so that's how I started working with Quincy Jones. Worked with Quincy Jones for 3 or 4 years in LA. I stayed there. They left, I stayed. I never left. Yeah.
What has been your favorite?
Oh, you gonna let it
Yeah,
be my
it's her question. Acting project that you have worked on.
Empire for sure.
Okay.
Oh, Empire for sure. You know, I will say the Tyler Perry plays was the greatness about doing the Tyler Perry plays, y'all, was that it was never the same. Every night, even though we were doing the same show over and over, just the audience changes you. If Tyler was on stage, it definitely was not gonna be the same. Because he would just say different stuff. He broke the fourth wall. He would start talking to people in the audience and everything. And the family behind it, was like, the other projects that I've done, I don't have that connection as much to people. These, like when I see these people that have come in here from these shows, it don't matter where we are. I'll never forget these people and how they made me feel. Like, I'll never forget the things that you've done for me. Like, I'll never forget the connections that you had. Yes, things change in your life and it just changes form and you're doing your life and whatever, but I'm like, I don't feel that way, honestly, about the people from Empire. Toronto I do, because that's like one of my really close friends, but we have the same thing. But you don't get that so much on shows. However, like, the platform-wise, I think that Empire just gave me something that was able to take me in a place that I wanted to go, that I feel like it's a toss-up when I say this, because the Tyler Perry plays, no, they weren't televised like that, but they were just way big. It was just as big, because it was during the time when he was rising to his height. And it was the only thing black folks really had. That was like, I was on these little bootleg DVDs, and he let me, be on 3 whole tours on bootleg DVDs that millions of people saw in the black community. That was huge, That it? Anybody else? Well, that's it, because I'm hot and I'm kind of. I really thank y'all for coming out, like sharing this time with me, sharing like this story. This story is something that is really not just dear to my heart because it's like me. I really feel like I wrote this knowing that there are people that will be going through things that I can say that I'm not embarrassed about. I'm happy to have been the guy who will now never lose the feeling of understanding and knowing where people are, because I've been there and lower. And not even lower, just there. Because it's not low all the time, because you're at a different situation. We was poor, never knew it. I knew we was, but I had some of the best times. And I realized, like, I have some friends with 20, 40, 50, 70 million dollars, and I have friends with $2 and $3. And some of those people I enjoy more. And it's because, like, I will never forget where I've been, where I come from, the things I deal with. And who knows what you're gonna deal with, but I'm so grateful for what I have had and what I've had to go through with this book. A lady in an interview asked me, she says, with the cards that you were dealt, how can you wake up and continue to go on and on with your life and just be so whatever? I said, because yes, the cards I was dealt was one thing. My origin was crazy, it was one thing. But look at the cards that I was left and given to play with. Like, this what I get out of it? This is the person that has to go on and pick up the pieces. I'm all right with that. Like, I feel like I was so blessed to say that this was such a big thing for me, but I was left with these cards to deal with and play with in my life. And now I feel like, as a man of where I am in life now, I understand how to play them right, play them fairly, play them better at dealing my hand out and not just saying, because I was never a shiesty person. However, I was so defensive, and I was so, all of these things, that this right here, this story, I open this story, and I'll close this today by saying, I open this story and I talk about the Big Bang Theory and how the planets and how scientists say that the planets were, aligned, knocked together a lot of asteroids and all of this, that, and the other, and that's how the universe was born. And I stop it by saying, and I personally believe in God, but I don't think that was any more of a coincidence than the story that I live today. There's no way, there's no other way. And no, I don't care what anybody else believes in, but for me, I cannot say that my life has not been ordered and that I have I did everything to go in the opposite direction. And it's still things that what I thought would be my end, that would be my detriment, it just always turned out to be exactly what it needed to be for me to go on and for me to be able to sit here today and tell you guys that yes, I claim this being the problem child for certain people, and there's so many other people that are out there that are dealing with that stuff. But everybody's got their stuff. Everybody's got their stuff in their family, and that's why I choose to share mine, because I know that it's a little different and a little crazy, but hopefully it'll help somebody. Thank you guys so much.
So can you say when the scripture says that all things
right.
work together
That's right.
for the good of them who love the
absolutely.
Lord and call according to his will?
I truly believe, like,
I know you
my
said
grandmother
that.
told me one day, she was like, I was watching the movie Forrest Gump. That reminds me of you. And I was like, okay, first of all, what you trying to say? But she's like, Terrell, the man was always in the right place at the right time. When I really stepped back, she sat back and she said to me, do you realize you have worked with everybody that's huge and big, and you've done this? And she says, not even for a resume. But how did you? She said you worked with Quincy Jones, P. Diddy, Celine Dion, Beyonce, all of these other people. She said, but it wasn't just that. She's like, look at the events. You started with Tyler Perry when he was starting. Like, you hooked up with that. You sung with Whitney Houston the last day before she died. You know, I played Jesse Smudge's boyfriend on Empire, and then this is like just being connected to, whether you call it good or bad, whatever you call it. I just call it being connected for a reason, to have a platform to touch people. They're always watching you. Me, the same guy who was the kid comes from somebody being molested at 11, and you're the kid that they give the platform to. That's why it's like when I meet people, I meet people, the stakes are higher. All of these people are pretty much dead. I have one cousin or something left. So when I meet people, when I'm in a relationship with somebody now, it's just different. I realize, instead of it, am I so emotional and sensitive? Well, of course I am. However, I know now how to deal with what it is. The stakes are higher when I meet people. When I'm calling you my friend or my family member, it's higher for me, and that doesn't mean it always got to be that for you. But what I mean is, I realize that that's what's so intense with me. So I don't jump right into anything anymore, or be so fast to cut you off either. But I'm realizing that's what it is, Terrell. You don't have this. So when you're meeting somebody, your expectations of somebody are high. And it's more just when I tell you I love you, I mean that. I really mean that. And I've seen it from a total different way, not only artistic, because artists, y'all know how it is. We think like this. So if somebody hurt me, oh my God, that means they did this, and it must be all this. And I knew exactly, because your mind is like that. The same way I'm thinking when I'm singing and all, and my mind is like, I can't wait till they hit those chords, because I'm gonna do all of this, and I'm ready for them. Because that's how I think musically, So that's it. But that's it. But you don't ask no more questions.
I'm waiting to get out.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
When did you know that you wanted to write this story? When did it hit you? Like, how many years ago was it? And, what made you say, did you want to do a story? Write a book? Did you want to switch into acting? Or did you want to direct? This might be a great movie.
Yeah.
When did you know?
I never thought about what's wrong? Oh, okay. I never thought about the entertainment aspect of it when I was writing it at all in the beginning. I never thought, oh my God, it was never that. It was like, I saw people going through some things that I was like, man, I need to talk about that. I need to talk about that. And I'll tell you, it was like some things where I had to find out who I was personally. Because I realized, I'm like, people are wondering this about you, or they want to know if this is this one. And I was like, I ain't completely this, but I kind of do like a little of this too. But that's what I think. But then I thought, this is my story. And there's so many different people. There was a young man who used to come to me at the Tyler Perry place when we went to Orlando. And I didn't write this in the book, but I'll tell the story. It's because it's in the second one. He used to come to me at the Tyler Perry place, and the guy was like just over the top. He was just like flamboyant and flaming. And I used to be sitting like, oh my God, I don't want him to come over here, because I know they already thinking this about me. And I know it's gonna come out that this guy's gonna come, oh my God, here he comes. He's like, and then he would always have his friend with him, and I was like, oh God, here this guy. And then you'd have the women who just see me in the audience, and then they'd be looking at me like, girl, I knew something wasn't right. And I remember thinking to myself how I did not want to talk to these two people because of how I was gonna feel, how I was afraid of what they was gonna think, and then all of these people get killed in Orlando. In that Orlando club shooting. And I was sitting there watching this in my house, and I'm thinking, here you are, worried about what somebody's gonna say about you. And this was not just that, but my story, period. And I was like, here I am, worried about what somebody's gonna say about who I am or what I'm doing or what I'm doing. And these people are dying. And they're dying in a place that they thought they were safe, but whether you believe or like what's going on in their life or not. And here I am worried. And that's when it broke my heart to see that. Then to see the guy's picture that he was one of the guys that was killed. The friend was one of the guys that was killed in the Orlando shoot. I said, I have a story, like everything that I keep saying that I wanted to do with my story, my mom and I, it wasn't just this. There's so many things that I'm connected, like that kind of thing. That one thing stood out to me so much, and I said, I have so much of it. That made me look and say, just like this story, that was so big that I need to speak out and say certain things to people, that there are young people that are looking at me and looking at people like that need this, that will stand up in front of anybody and be like, first of all, I don't give a damn what you think or say. And when I tell y'all, it's hard to feel that way. When people say, I don't care what nobody thinks, most of the time they do. But when I tell you, when it comes to the negative and all that, I'm like, first of all, take a number. They've said it many times. Some of it was true, some of it wasn't, but however, it doesn't even matter. That moment when those people died was when I realized that's one story about what was going on in my life that I felt like I had to speak out about. And I was like, and when I did in an interview, and I got all of these responses from these kids that were gonna commit suicide about this. I went and spoke at the high school, and this young dude drove and was like, oh man, I'm so glad you said that. I've been dealing with this, and I never knew how to talk to, and I can see that and I'm thinking to myself, this is how big this is, like this one incident. I got a whole incident, the whole story about how I was born that I know that people need to hear. So maybe 3 years ago, and that's, but whenever that happened, that's when it was after that. Whenever that Orlando situation happened, that's when I realized, and I spoke out about that, I realized that I need to write this book. So it was like right after that. And I wrote this book, never writing a book, ever. I did a movie in Iraq with some other actors called Curse of Mesopotamia, which turned out to be a good B-horror film if you want to watch it. But the experience and the relationships were good. The lady who plays in that movie with me just so happened to be a writer. So she was the editor for the book. Another thing that just, connected it, and it was right. And I told her my story. She was like, oh my God, I love to edit it. Because I don't, grammatically, I knew I was just going to be run on sentences. So she helped me edit it, but to write the story, I wrote all of this. But we wrote this book, we did this book in maybe 3 months. This whole story. Because it just, I lived this, you guys. And the title of the book at first was called Because I Lived It. And I had written a song called Problem Child, which is ironic that I didn't release it, but she was like, no, that's the name of the book. I sent her this song and said, when you think about it, she says, Terrell, that's the name of your book. And I just would write every day, write all the stuff and then send it out, and she would just correct the grammar in it. But she said, Terrell, we've written this book in 3 months. 3 months, and I had no deal, nothing. And I promised we leaving after this part. But I had no deal. I was at Coachella. And I was wasted at this thing called a silent disco at night when you have you wear these little headphones because the noise ordinance, so you can still stay up and be in the last part. So I'm dancing around, and these two girls come up and they were like, "Hey, ain't you the guy from Empire?" And I'm thinking to myself, now I don't never mind taking pictures, or never mind talking to people, except for when I'm like wasted or in a place where I don't want, what I'm saying? Because I don't want you to think that. So I'm like, oh yeah, trying to keep it together. And my other friends, and it seemed like they just left. So then I took pictures with these two young ladies, and they left. And then I'm just standing there. Then this thin little guy comes up. He's a little white guy, and comes up and he's standing there bouncing and dancing, and he just keeps looking up, and I'm like, oh God. I was like, I just got what he's getting. I know he's gonna say something. And then he's looking, and earlier in that day, there was things that were happening, and I saw people like other artists and stuff at Coachella, and I was like, no, I shouldn't say that. And then something hit me and was like, I was never shy, but until you start opening your mouth, you're never gonna get the things that you want. And they're not gonna happen when you want. So this guy comes up, there's a little boy just dancing. And then I'm like, okay. Then he takes out this little thing like I don't know what he had, something. And then he has like all of these little water bottles. And you can tell when somebody's trying to get you to look down and talk to him. And so I'm being tall, you ain't never gotta look down. So I'm you know that. So I'm standing up like this a little bit, and then he finally just like drinks some of the water, and he making noise. I was like, God, dude, what is this? And so he says, you want one of these waters, don't you? He says, well, until you open your mouth and ask for the things that you want, you're not gonna, I promise you guys, I get chills.
Wow.
just thinking about that. When I look down at this guy like I just said that to myself today. Like, it changed everything. So of course I got the water. Turns out, this boy was 21 years old, independently wealthy. He's one of my really, really good friends now. We only fight about him being a Republican. But at the end of the day, I'll tell you, 21 years old, and we talked about it, we left, sitting there, talking about our stories, on this little hill in the cold, until, because we were all camping. It was 2 o'clock the next day, they had started Coachella again for the next day, and he and I we were still sitting there. And this boy told me, he says, you reminded myself, I'm 21 years old. He says, I left my family, opened up my own business as a PR company at 19. He has some of the biggest clients. He says, I opened up my business. He says, I'm here with some other 21-year-olds. They're back at the house, and they had some house that they were renting. He said, they didn't want to come there because they were running their businesses. And you know, people say that kind of stuff all the time. Well, it turns out to be true. I told him my story. The guy says, I represent a company that did Lady Gaga's and Daddy's book and all of that. Please send me the synopsis of this. I said, I got it right here. I sent him the synopsis. He sends the synopsis to the publisher, and we're still talking. I get up. He says, oh, here you go. He said, well, you got a book deal. That's how I got this deal.
Look at God.
That's how I got this deal. That's why, for me, my life, and everything that happens, I can sit back and be like, oh, I'm excited. Oh, the car blew up? That means something else getting ready to happen. It has happened like that to me. Do y'all understand how crazy that is? To never even think I was gonna write a book, but then here it is. And that is how I got a book deal? That dude.
The little dude. So I know we're ready to go, but so are we doing the play to the book, the movie to the book?
Oh,
like,
well,
what we
you know
doing?
what? Like I told when I was telling Stitch, when I was writing this, I never thought about I mean, I'm down now. But I didn't write this for entertainment reasons. So my mind wasn't even there. I didn't even know what was gonna happen, how it was gonna come out. I didn't know. But just like when I'm singing something or writing something, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, you know that this is hot. You killing this. Yeah. When I started writing this towards the middle part, I was like, yeah, this is how I know. And then I realized I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had gone to school. The school of Fred Hammond, the school of Tyler Perry, the school of Quincy Jones, the school of P. Diddy, all of that stuff, and all of that played a part of it. The way that I presented my family reminded me a lot of all of the shows that I've been in with Tyler. The way that I thought about how to structure everything so it'll eloquently go along and you're riding on a roller coaster was how it was when I was doing stuff that Quincy Jones taught me. Like, that's how it was. So now, I'm at the point where I actually have 2 deals for a film for this. I am different now, business-wise, than I was before, to where I'm not jumping at the first thing that comes my way. Because before, it would be like me and you guys know Cheryl Pepsi Riley, that was in the plays with us. We used to talk about it on the bus all the time. She's like, Terrell, remember when we saw kids and everybody come, oh my God, I got a record deal. You got a record deal. Then you realize that was the worst deal that you ever signed in your life. So now, yes, I have 2 film production companies that really want to do this as a film. I want to wait and make sure I don't feel it. I don't feel it, and one of them will be great money for me. But this right here is not an album. This ain't a few songs I wrote. This is a story that means a whole lot, and I want it to be presented the way that I want it to be presented. It don't necessarily have to be completely me doing it, but however, it has to be right. So I'm looking in that direction.
I have one quick question. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I'm fine. I know people in here, they've already been, no, it's fine. So they mad at you.
So, we know whenever you're able to speak your truth, it empowers you, right? So what specific ways since you've written that book, has it changed you or has it empowered you, right? And then what do you want the reader to take away, other than empowerment, of course, what other specific things you want the reader to take?
Well, you're empowered when you can own the things that it is. If you're mentally ill, if you need to go get some help and you saying, oh, I'm fine. But meanwhile, you just shot the neighbor and he under the house. Mm-hmm. That ain't like, when you can claim the things, it is okay for you to claim when you need help. It is okay for you to know what's going on. This is my story. I need to claim this. I need to be okay with this, because the moment that I am okay with this, and not only that, even if you are embarrassed, you take the power out of somebody else telling it if you tell it. And it'll be the way that you want it to be, if that's your concern. Because that was my concern, not even with this, but other things. And I would see little write-ups, little black bloggers would be saying little stuff, and I'm sitting there like, they're lying. They're lying, and I know what they were lying about, and I know what they were telling the truth about. But then when I decided, I was like, well, first of all, this ain't even that big of a deal. Certain things just ain't, but it took the power out of you telling my story. Changed my life. It changes your fears. It changes, you know, whatever. And then if you do have some issues, mine weren't issues, they were just my business. The issues that you're dealing with, you can go and gladly, proudly go and get them taken care of. You know what I'm saying? That is empowering. I own now my issues. I own my business. I own that. So if you're writing about it now, first of all, take a number because it'll roll it. That's how you feel. You don't feel like, oh my God, I'm scared to turn to page 28 because they know that's gonna get to me. No, it's not like that, you know? And another thing, everybody got their I don't care who it is. I don't care who it is. And this 2020 should show y'all. This election and all of that other stuff, people's stuff will come out and you be like, no, you were supposed to have been the pastor. Now they just caught you on camera when you thought the camera was off. Like everybody does what they do. Don't think that you're alone. You know? Live your life. Live your life. Do what's best. And I'm telling you, doing what's best by people and is always going to be better for you. As much as that, my only lesson, loving people the way that you want to be loved and treating people right, even when it feels like you want to do bad things. I'd rather walk away than we get revenge on somebody nowadays. It doesn't matter. I don't even need to do that. I don't need to do that. That's the end of the questions. Thank you. We're done.
But you're not done yet.
Okay. What's that?